Today, I am going to present to you the mystery of the Taguiling bululs. These are the Taguiling bululs. Now, what is the question? I've invited these two stunning bululs from the North Luzon Peninsula of the Philippines. They are very important cultural representations of the Ifugao people who live there. Bululs are rice granary guardians carved by the Ifugao people. And these two bululs that you see, Mr. and Mrs. Bululs, have a paternity issue. For the past 40 years, since they've come to the Fowler Museum in 1986, they have been attributed to a very famous Ifugao woodcarver by the name of Taguiling. But in 2025, our Philippine colleagues, scholars, contacted us and said, no, you cannot say that Taguiling himself carved these two bululs. We strongly recommend that you say attributed to Taguiling. This change put a huge question mark in my mind. Now, I started by investigating who Taguiling was. I wanted to know about the carver that was so famous, and we were priding that we have two Taguiling bululs in our holdings, and suddenly, 40 years later, we're told we have to say, we don't know for sure, we have to say attributed to Taguiling. Maybe someone else did it. Well, I started with Taguiling himself. He was a very renowned woodcarver from Cababuyan in northern Luzon, Philippines. He worked in the late 1800s and was very active until 1930. He carved many objects, but particularly bululs, and he used the local Nara wood, which is very dense, very sturdy, very thick, and very reliable. Now, he became so famous that he had many, many admirers / imitators who started carving bululs that looked like the Taguiling bululs. So they were not being differentiated. Which ones did Taguiling do? Which ones did his admirers, imitators did? It was very difficult to tell. Now, Taguiling was very clever, and he realized what was happening, and he said, instead of only carving bululs for the rice rituals, planting the seeds, growing the rice shoots, harvesting the grains, storing the grains, having feasts celebrating the bounty of the earth, instead of just having bululs for those rituals, how about if I carve some bululs for our visitors from the Western world? Taguiling, he was very clever. As soon as he realized that he had an entire army of admirer, imitator woodcarvers, he said, instead of just carving very handsome bululs for the rice cycle rituals, from planting the seeds to taking care of the newly born shoots of rice plant, to protecting the mature rice plants and harvesting the rice grains, to storing the rice in special containers, and finally to have a big feast honoring the bululs, honoring ancestry, and honoring the bounty of the land. I can do that, Taguiling said to himself. But I'm also going to create carvings, bulul-like carvings, for all our foreign visitors who are intrigued by these bululs and they want to take them home with them. So he successfully blended the traditional with the commercial, and he was the first one to start an all-out commercial market for his wood sculptures. And of course, his admirers, imitators, followed him immediately. Now, a gentleman by the name of Owen Tomlinson enters the scene. Who was Owen Tomlinson? He was an American constabulary stationed in the Philippines during U.S. colonial rule. And he met Taguiling. He liked the way the bululs were carved, and he said, "Mr. Taguiling, I want you to carve 2 bululs that look like me." And that became the onset of Taguiling's art being differentiated from any other wood carving, because Taguiling was also the first one to carve bululs that had human features. So I don't know if Mr. Tomlinson sat as a model for Taguiling to carve him, but this is exactly with the human eyes, nose, ears, you know, the head, the shape of the head, all human features. So are these the ones that Mr. Tomlinson sat as a model? We don't know. We're going to find out. I hope we're going to find out. So, are these the ones or aren't these the ones? Are these copies? So the 2 bululs right next to me, X865522 and X865523. The 86 means they entered the Fowler Museum's holdings in 1986, share all the stylistic attributes associated with Taguiling's work. Now, this was the background setting in my mind. I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. So I said, okay, lead number 1, the Tomlinson Archive. Let's see what this constabulary who went to the Philippines, who commissioned 2 bululs carved in his image to Taguiling, the master carver, what does he have in his archives? Well, I found his archive. It is at the Bentley Historical Library at the University of Michigan. And the entire Owen Tomlinson archive is located there. The archive includes photographs from his time in Ifugao land. It includes all the constabulary, official constabulary paperwork. It includes receipts of all his spendings in the Philippines. And, I said, this is so fascinating. I'm going to dive very deep into this archive, and I'm going to prove that Taguiling carved these 2 bululs. Well, I deflated very fast because the librarian said, oh, we have about 40 boxes of Tomlinson archives. that have never been scanned. If you have the time to come and spend weeks at the library in Michigan, maybe we can arrange something, but we cannot help you. Well, I couldn't travel to Michigan. I couldn't spend several weeks to dig through the boxes of the Tomlinson archives, and I faced a dead end. The minute I found my curiosity again, I went to lead number 2. I said, let me check the donors file in the registration department of the museum, and let me find out if who this donor was, because the objects do not have any donor attribution. They are donated anonymously. So then I did some behind-the-scenes research, and I found out who the donor is. But out of respect, because he already has left us, he's not here with us, but out of respect to his soul and spirit, I'm not going to tell you who he was. He wanted to remain anonymous, even for posterity, forever. So I went to the donor archive, and I found one of the most interesting documents, and I'm going to show it to you. The appraisal form and the examination of the 2 bululs by a very highly respected appraiser, Mr. Barry Kitnick, who is no longer with us either. And I'm going to read directly from what he wrote in his appraisals. Both were sculpted in the first quarter of this century by noted carver Taguiling of Kababuyan, as documented by George Ellis and published in The People and Art of the Philippines. We want to see that book? Oh, this is a 40-year-old book, and it's been used a lot. So George Ellis was the director, and I'm going to show you, these are our 2 very famous couple in that book. This is we consider this to be the ultimate book of Philippine art and culture. And I think what's going to happen is scholars in the future are going to add to this book. This is like a foundational book. So Mr. Barry Kitnick officially said, these are carved by Taguiling. Kitnick made a direct attribution, and at that time, 40 years ago, these were valued, their value had 5 digits. I don't know the dollar value, but I counted how many numbers it had. It had 5 digits, so it was very, very high. And these are one of the finest bulul couples that we know of. But George Ellis, in his book, he actually collected art in the Philippines, in Manila. He worked very closely with an art dealer by the name of William Baer. William Baer was the son of Otley Baer, who in the early 1900s went to North Luzon, Philippines, as the first anthropologist to study the culture of the Ifugao people. So eventually his son opened an art gallery in Manila and did a lot of business with Westerners. So our former director, George Ellis, when he went to Manila, he actually purchased a lot of Philippine art from William Baer. Now keep that name in mind, because the next time I face a dead end, I'm going to go to William Baer. So George Ellis knew Taguiling's work very well. He collected Taguiling look-alike objects. And the one that he collected for himself is currently at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, who I contacted to find who was the artist of that Taguiling. They look very similar. The Met, it's been, what, 4 or 5 months now? They didn't reply. Well, maybe one day they will reply, or maybe one day I will go and find a curator and say, okay, where is it? Show me the archive. It might happen. But Ellis, in his book, and I read his book, never said that these bululs were 100% attributed to Taguiling. He never denied, but he never fully admitted. So, there is a gray area. So, Barry Kitnick, I can't go back to his archives because a couple of years ago, there was a major flood in the geographic location where he lived, and most of his archives have been damaged. So there is no way I can dig in his archive. George Ellis, all I could do was read his book, this book, The People and Art of the Philippines, and I also have a copy of his oral history archive, and that's about it. Both have left us, and they're in heaven, I hope, and I cannot contact them. So, for any clarification. Okay, again, I felt crushed, but it took me maybe 24 hours to regain my curiosity. Lead number 4, I said, that's it. I'm going to various Philippine sources. I had William Baer in mind. I found out that William Baer had closed his art gallery. You know, thanks to Google, everything is possible nowadays. I found out that he closed his gallery in probably 1975-76. That was the year he closed his gallery. But his son, Henry Baer, held all the gallery archives. Now, if I could find a document in that archive saying, yeah, on this day, at such and such an hour, George Ellis went to visit William Baer, and he purchased 5-6 bululs from him, plus many other objects. Okay, that will move me closer to saying, I think Taguiling carved these, but I couldn't do that. So it was quite difficult to contact Henry Baer. What I did, using Facebook, I found him, and I sent him a message on Messenger, Facebook Messenger, saying, we are so delighted that, you know, our former director used to purchase objects. You know, I wrote a very nice text, and I said, I want to find out more about the carver of these 2 bululs that we love, cherish so much. We try to exhibit whenever we can. We take so much pride. I wanted to find out more. Until today, he hasn't replied. And I contacted him mid-October 2025. Then, as I was investigating a little further, I found another site on Facebook. You know, we think Facebook is antique, you know, passé. But sometimes when you're dealing with the rest of the world outside the United States, Facebook comes in very handy. I don't own shares in Facebook. So I found another website, another site called Hungduan. And Hungduan is one of the very famous rice-growing regions in North Luzon Peninsula. It is actually protected by UNESCO. And when I looked at the image, the Facebook image of Hungduan, I couldn't believe what I saw. And I'm going to show it to you. And I hope we can all see this. Okay, can you see this image? Can you see? Okay, now, the Hungduan Facebook site had the same image. Wow, I said, aha, I found someone who knows about our bululs. So I wrote to them very nicely saying, oh, we're so excited. You know all about our bululs. They're all in the United States. We love these two bululs, and on and on. And I want to find out more about Taguiling. You know, what can you tell me? Please, let's communicate. No reply. 2 days ago, on January 21, I went to that same site, this site, and this is dated November 26. I went to this same Facebook location to see what happened. They blocked me. They took the photo out and they blocked me. And I'm very offended. They blocked me. They don't want me to ask them questions, which makes me ask more questions. I don't know. I don't know. We have come to, I've investigated many sources. I've gone down many rabbit holes. And what did I pull out? What is the conclusion of all these leads that actually added to the history of the object? They're not wasted. They added to the history of the object. What did I find? This continents-wide detective work. So what we know, that's one thing I established. There was an original pair carved by Taguiling for Mr. Tomlinson, and the bululs that Taguiling carved for Mr. Tomlinson had human features, just like our bululs. So what we don't know, that's one thing we know. What we don't know, whether our bululs are the original pair, or whether they were made by Taguiling's admirers/imitators. Taguiling did not have a special signature or a sign that he carved on his bululs. So he just carved and carved and carved, and that's it. Now, there is evidence that the professional appraiser said they're Taguiling's bululs. But the museum's director, Mr. George Ellis, was more cautious in his attribution. And there is a 40-year gap. Imagine, I've been presenting to you what happened in 1986, and now we are in 2026, and that makes 40 years. There's a 40-year gap And for 40 years, until last year, mid last year, we were saying, oh, Taguiling carved these. Now we're saying attributed to Taguiling. Now, we are going to say attributed to Taguiling until maybe one day somehow I find out exactly who carved them. But imagine for a moment, think of finding a painting that looks exactly like a Claude Monet, the French Impressionist, a Claude Monet painting, but it doesn't have Claude Monet's signature on it. If you can trace it back to his studio, fine. Maybe you can find documentation of that painting that he did, that he didn't sign, etc. But there are many, many painters around the world for the past century who have admired Claude Monet, who have painted scenery in the style of the Impressionists that look very much like Claude Monet paintings. If you have one of those, you would say either in the style of Claude Monet, attributed to Claude Monet, and it still represents an artistic era. And this is where we are. It's very similar to Taguiling or whoever carved them. Now, why does this still matter? Why am I still continuing talking about this? Because, do you think this makes our bululs less valuable? No, not at all. Because these objects represent the culture, the beliefs, the lifestyle of the Ifugao people of the northern Luzon Peninsula in the Philippines. Bululs have always been part of their lifestyle. They represent their continuity. You see, these are not dead ends. These are projections into the future. And they're very valuable. If you went to the North Luzon Peninsula, which some of our team members went, you should have seen the photos they took of bululs in every single ceremonial household, wherever they went. These bululs are representative of their ancestry and of their future. It doesn't stop the culture. These are alive and well, and they need our admiration and our protection. And they're very significant to the people. Now, the mystery of who carved them doesn't change their cultural value and their cultural attributions. And the generational link that they create, whether Taguiling carved or whether his admirer imitators carved, these objects are the symbols of forever, hopefully for eternity, continuity of the Ifugao people for eternity. And this is the provenance research that goes behind most of the objects that we have here at the Fowler Museum. And this was the provenance research I did of Mr. Taguiling, the carver.